a friend by the name of Hans Brignitz. He was an acrobat. Macht das Bild auf dem Michel, das macht er mal. Ich sage, du bist ja verrückt da oben auf dem Michel. Ja, das macht das keiner. Und er hatte auch, der war so trainiert, der hat seinen ganzen Körper, he had his body in control, total control. He could do anything with his body. And he did this for me. We went up, it was drizzling, a bit of raining. And got this picture, which was quite funny. Walter Benzer called me in, who the chef called me in one day, and he said, "You're so slim and thin." I said, "Well, I got no money. My mother didn't send me any money, and she was in South Africa. You can take football pictures. Throughout Germany, in the tobacco shops and the sweet shops, they had a big frame where they showed every week the latest football pictures. You see about a dozen or so. So if one of your football picture gets into the series, you get 20 marks, which wasn't very much, but was enough for me. However, I had to photograph 5 football games a weekend. It was freezing cold sometimes, and my shutter frozen. It was really, and I don't want to photograph football anymore. I wanted to go to New York, because New York was a place where I was told they were waiting for the German photographers to come, because they were skilled. And they were skilled working with 35, with the Leica and so on, 35 millimeter, whereas the tradition was still to work with a 4x5 speed graphic, huge camera. So photographers in those days, they were like plumbers, treated like plumbers or like lower middle class people. They were not important. They had to be told by the writers exactly what to do, and the writer would say, "Now you do this, do this." It was the opportunity, the only opportunity I had to leave Germany. Southampton to Cape Town by New Union Castle line, which went every week. I went to the Star, the Argus group. I don't know if you know, it's the biggest paper. They got paper in all the cities in South Africa and so on. And I went to the photography department looking for work. And they told me I must go and see the head of the department. He was in the canteen, so I went to the canteen, and he was sitting there drinking tea. And I introduced myself and told him my story. And I had my Leica hanging over my shoulder here. And he looked at me and he says, "If you come to South Africa with this miniature camera, you haven't got a hope in hell ever getting a job." You see, I thought, what's the matter with that guy? And they were using these big cameras, you see, and they were going out with these big things. It was 2 slides, they took 2 or 3 pictures, that's all, of events, you know, the events where people shaking hands or people passing a check on, or that sort of pictures. There wasn't photojournalism or documentary work, didn't exist there. Then somebody came and said, "You know, there is this magazine called Drum, but I wouldn't work for them, you know, it's only for blacks, and it's terrible to work with blacks, and they don't pay very well anyway." I obviously, like anything, I went there quickly, and the owner and the head of the thing was a very famous South African cricketer called Bob Crisp. There were 2 people there. There was Henrik Malo, who was the sports writer, and there was a woman, she was Italian, and she was a secretary, and she couldn't write English properly. And then later on was a freelancer, Todd Machikita. He was a pianist, telephone player, and he wrote music. He wrote a whole symphony once, which was played, and was a very good writer. Magic Keys, they called it Magic Keys. His name was Magic, because he wrote his typewriter the same way he used to play his piano. You see. People there were most of them what I would call African intellectuals. You see, many of them had been to missionary schools, and there were many missionary schools and Jesuit schools. They taught philosophy, you see, and they were very, very bright people, and most of them were non-racial. A black person had all the right to hate white people to how they were treated. They were treated, they were either psychologically or physically, their whole personality was affected. A white South African would have never stopped, would never have gone. They were so terrified to mix with black people because they were so indoctrinated. And also the white suburbs, there was a curfew. That means after a certain hour, any black person that was found was immediately picked up by a flying squad car and put into prison. You see, every black man at that time had to have a passbook. And you had to go to the Native Affairs Department, get permission that you can go from, let's say, a township in Johannesburg and a township in Germiston, which was 20 kilometers away. I was with these two guys doing a story about the pass laws, you see, because they had no passes. Now there were the two white policemen, they came along, and they were hiding there because we were together, you see. So I went down on my knees on the left-hand side. So the police looked at me and they smiled and they were very proud being photographed. You can see they look very happy. And they just walked past and didn't see them. There was a treason trial. There were 150, I think it was 157 people arrested. Mostly there were Indians and black people and from different organizations and so on. Outside the court, people started to demonstrate and sing and so on. So every now and then the police started charging with batons, you see. And I had with me an assistant, his name was Peter Magubani, who I was teaching. It was one of his first jobs. Of course, the police didn't like photographers. They didn't want to be photographed. But especially a black photographer, you see. That was worse. So they got him in a side street into a driveway, you see. There were about 4 of them beating them with a sjambok, you see. So I don't know what happened to me. I saw red. I remember how I even decided to do this. I dived. I was still quite fit, and I dived right, and I was on top of the police. They were doing this, and I was right on top of them. So they, of course, dispersed and then arrested me and Peter and took us to the police station. And at the police station, they took off our ties, and you had to took off the cameras and so on. And they put me into a cell, and they put Peter into a cell for black people. It was on Robben Island, and he was visiting Robben Island because he was released in 1991. So this was his first visit to Ireland. And he traveled around and looked at everything. So he went into the cell, and there were a few film people there. They said you can have, 3 minutes or 5 minutes. And I noticed that he actually took his time standing there. He actually went into a slight, not into a trance, but into a belief, looking back into the past. Because when I said to him, thank you very much, he turned around and he gave me a little smile. And I got a picture of that too. and I could see that he was coming out of something. He was definitely in, that is why you can see that in the picture. He was in that prison where he was, I think in there he was 17 years in that cell. It's a training, it's pure training. You have to train yourself. And you have to also be trained to understand distance, light in all conditions. You can't rely on a light meter and things like that. You have to know exactly what you can get onto the film and how. I mean, I was in a situation we used to use films, and I used to come back from a job, and the editor, have you got a cover? I said, yes, I got a picture, such and such and such and such. It's so, and I got this person, and I got this picture there. I haven't even developed a film. I could tell him that I got one picture, which was okay. Because you really working extremely hard on the technique of seeing. And it had nothing to do with the camera, it's the eye. Ist natürlich dumm. Die Leute, die fotografieren, die was sie essen. Und wir waren mit mal rausgegangen, da fotografierte die Frau, die hatte Fisch gegessen. Hatte erstmal den Fisch, als der da ankam, und hinterher hatte die Gräten noch fotografiert, auch noch, was übrig blieb, ja. Also ich dachte, wie denken denn die Menschen? Jetzt haben sie die Technik und sie können das nicht benutzen. Auf jeden Fall, naja, das war alles.
Dankeschön.